Hey guys, this is Chloe. If you've ever been on my channel, you'll probably notice that I cut my hair. But most of you are probably here to get tips on how to self-study for apush. And I also have an essay to write after this video, so we're gonna get straight into it. A little bit of a disclaimer before I start giving my tips is I did take the AP exam right when the pandemic hit, so that this is when the AP exam was online, 45 minutes, only DBQ, and open note. And another bit of background about me, I did take a United History class during 8th grade. I'm not sure how much that helped, but this way you at least know that I had some kind of a background. This material wasn't completely new to me. I also did take AP European History the year prior to this, so I had an understanding of how to write the FRQs and how to study for history courses. Another thing I want to mention really quickly is the tips I'm going to give you now isn't going to magically, get you to a 5 or even work for you. Everybody has different learning styles, so what I use might not necessarily work for you. What works for you might not necessarily work for me. So basically what I'm trying to say is take everything I say with a grain of salt. Also keep in mind that the steps that I took did require a lot of time and effort. I think I consistently put about 4 hours per day into studying for apush. So I just want to put those disclaimers out there, just so you're not comparing yourself to me, saying, oh, this person only studied for a week and got a 5. Why can't I do it? There were a lot of things and circumstances that somehow worked out in my favor. I think that was a pretty big part of how I was able to get a 5 on this exam. But I just want to share some of the tips and processes that I used while studying for my test. So now that you have those disclaimers in mind, let's get right into the tips. So the first thing is looking through the College Board syllabus. College Board actually prepares a syllabus every year, I think, for every single AP course. So what I did was I made it into a booklet. It lists out the themes that College Board wants you to focus on, and it actually has some learning targets by period. It gives you pretty specific ideas as to what you should know for sure. So in my case, I just looked through this before I actually started studying for the test. That way I get a basic framework of what I should be focusing on. So what we're doing is we're studying to the test. We only have a week left. We don't actually have time to delve into the intricacy of United States history. The second section is reading a simplified version of the textbook. Taking notes directly from the textbook was way too time consuming. Thankfully, I had a study buddy who was also self-studying, and we actually found a PDF of our exact textbook, but in a notes, bulleted format. So that's what I ended up looking through instead of the actual textbook that has complete sentences. So what I did while looking through the simplified version is reading through it 3 times. So I know this sounds like a lot, but when I say reading through it, it doesn't mean, go into every single detail and try to memorize it while you're reading it. What I suggest is that you read through it very lightly. In my opinion, reading through something really in depth and trying to memorize it on the first go within 10 hours is much less efficient than reading through something a little bit lightly but multiple times within those 10 hours. It sticks a lot more to your brain if you keep rereading things. So that's why I advise that you read it at least 3 times. So the first time you read it is sort of going to be like reading a Sparks Notes version of the textbook. You're just going to want to get the general framework, and if you've ever had any prior classes that you took about United States history, then maybe it'll jog some of your memory back, remind you of all the events that did happen throughout the course of the timelines. The second time you read it, you're going to want to highlight by concept. So like I mentioned before, the College Board syllabus gives you those general big idea themes. So what I did was I just chose a different color highlighter for each theme, and as I was sort of skimming through the details, I highlighted the details that seemed important and labeled it into those themes by highlighting in that specific color. And the third time you read it is just basically going to be like the first time. It's just another brief skim of everything that you've done, sort of looking at which details that I highlight, things like that. The third step that I want to talk about is making a blank page review sheet. There are 3 blank page review sheets that I advise that you do. The first 2 are optional, and the third one is what I think is the most essential. So the first one is by time period. On the top, you're just going to write what time period it is, and then you're just going to sort of list out some events, extra details, big important ideas in chronological order. I recommend putting arrows or anything else that like hints to you that there are connections. That way you sort of get a chronological, structured timeline of the events. The second type of the review sheet is formatted by concept. So this is like the time period one, except the header is going to be the big thematic concept. This way you have a page to reference as you try to think of specific details that you put in your free response questions. And the third type, which I think is the most important of the 3 that I've mentioned so far, is the combination. So it's just like it sounds. It's a combination of the timeline and the concept. So you're going to want like 1 to 2 pages per time period, except instead of putting things in chronological order, you're going to place things in sections by concept. And each concept will have things under it, obviously. Obviously, this won't necessarily give you the chronological order of events, but I think when it comes to AP exams, having those themes in mind is more important sometimes. Again, grain of salt, but more important than trying to get the order of events. My advice when it comes to making these review sheets is make sure that there are no gaps in the reasoning, meaning like don't leave out something that if left out will confuse you when you go back to look at it. So after a couple hours or maybe a day, if you like look back at it, you shouldn't have trouble understanding what you wrote and how everything connects. So that's not to say like write down every single like tiny little detail word for word, like how the notes or the textbook says. So when it comes to note taking, my biggest philosophy, I guess you could call it, is you take notes not necessarily to write down the content, but to remind yourself how you understood that content in the first place. So the notes shouldn't necessarily be focused on the content itself more so than the connections that you made in your brain the time that you did understand it. So the next time you go through it, you don't have to re-understand it. It's already laid out for you how you understood it in the first place. Hopefully that makes sense. Once you have those review sheets, you should keep looking at it when you have the time to. So by looking at it, what I'm trying to say is try to take a mental picture of each review sheet. Look at the general outline of what's on the page. Where is it on the page? Remembering where something is on the page will help you sort of dig deeper into your memory, like jog your memory back to the smaller details better than if you were to just memorize each detail on its own. So look at the bigger forest, and then each tree, and then each branch. So that will help you get a better mental picture of each page. That way, when you're actually taking the test, you can jog your memory. Oh, like this specific concept was on the left bottom corner of this page. And then I don't know if this happens to everyone, but like once you remember sort of that portion of the page, it's foggy to begin with, but it sort of clears up as you keep jogging your memory back to it. So that will probably help. And then this last step, the fourth step, is if you have time. Like I mentioned before, this is a very time-consuming process. So if you have less than a week, or maybe like if you don't have as much time to devote each day to this process, then you might not have the time to do this. But if you do have the time, what I would advise is you take a blank piece of paper and you try to recreate that mental picture that you just took of the review sheet. And inevitably, there are things that you don't remember, or things that slip your mind, or things that you forget. Well, I just said the same thing in 3 different ways. But so those things that you forget, go back to the original review page and fill it in with a different color. Fill it in the recreated version with a different color. And that will signal to you like what you're missing, what you're actually having trouble on, because we want to focus on those rather than what you already know. Obviously, we don't have time to do it as many times as we can to get it like perfectly in our minds. But doing that a couple times will at least signal to you like what you're actually missing from your brain, and it'll stick better in your brain if you know that you've missed something in the past. So those are all the tips that I have for you today. Hopefully it was helpful. If you like this video, please like and comment and maybe subscribe. Thank you for watching, and good luck on your remaining AP exams.